This is Africa, Wars and Battles Explained. We talk about wars in the hope that men may learn to honorably avoid it. Rwanda is a small nation of rolling hills, once called the land of 1,000 hills. But in 1994, these hills became silent witnesses to one of humanity's darkest chapters, a genocide that claimed more than 800,000 lives in just 100 days. This was no sudden event. No, not at all. The seed of division found its roots way back in the colonial era. First by Germany in 1899, then by Belgium after World War I. In this episode of Africa, Wars and Battles Explained, we uncover the tragic story of Rwanda, the 100 Days of Hell. The genocide in Rwanda in 1994 shocked the world with its speed and scale. In just 100 days, an estimated 800,000 people were murdered. But to better understand how a society could descend into such violence, we must go back. We must trace Rwanda's history, from its pre-colonial roots through European colonial usurpation, domination, and manipulation, to the years of independence, exile, civil war, and ultimately, the genocide. Rwanda's story is not simply about ethnic hatred. It is about how identities were politicized, how power was contested, and how the failures of both regional and international actors as well as economic downturn contributed to a catastrophe. We begin with Rwanda's early civilization. Not unlike many parts of Africa, Rwanda developed as a highly centralized kingdom, long before European colonization. At its head was the Mwami, the king, supported by chiefs who oversaw land, cattle, and military duties. Three main groups lived together in this society. The Tutsi, about 14 to 15%, were primarily cattle herders and dominated political and economic leadership. The Hutu, around 84%, were agriculturalists and formed the majority. The Tua, just 1 to 2%, were hunter-gatherers and pottery makers, often marginalized. But these were not fixed ethnicities in the modern sense. A Hutu could rise to Tutsi status by acquiring cattle, a process called kwihutura, and a Tutsi could fall to Hutu if impoverished. All spoke the same language, Kinyarwanda, and shared the same culture. This was an unequal society, yes, but also an integrated one. That fragile balance, however, was not unshakable and will indeed be tested. Because beneath the surface, power struggles within the royal court were beginning to fracture the unity. So when Europeans first set their eyes on Rwanda, the kingdom was not entering a golden age of stability. It was entering a period of turbulence and succession disputes. On the eve of European arrival, the Kingdom of Rwanda was experiencing its own internal shaking. King Kigeli Rwabugiri, one of the most powerful monarchs in Rwandan history, had expanded Rwanda's borders through conquest and centralized its authority. To secure the succession, he named his adopted son, Mibambwe Rutarindwa, as heir, and even elevated him to co-reign for 5 years alongside him, ensuring the court and chiefs recognized his authority. Yet, when Rwabugiri died in 1895, Rutarindwa's legitimacy was challenged almost immediately. You see, in Rwandan tradition, true kingship was not guaranteed by royal decree alone. It also required recognition by guardians of the Ubwiru, the esoteric code of rituals and sacred knowledge that bound the kingdom together. Many who held this secret code doubted Rutarindwa's right to rule, questioning whether the adopted son could embody the divine essence of kingship. This tension opened the door for rivals within the royal household. Most dangerously, Queen Kanjogera, who sought the throne for her biological son, Yuhi Muzinga. Court politics hardened into bitter factions. Infighting erupted in the royal compound. Blades clashed, and allies deserted him. Cornered and defeated, Mbambwe for Rutarindwa, the young king who had co-reigned beside Rwabugiri, took his own life. His death marked not only the end of his short reign, but the beginning of a fractured monarchy whose divisions would soon meet European intrusion. So the boy king, Yuhi V. Muzinga, ascended the throne, but his reign began not in triumph, but in blood and division. The monarchy stood weakened, its unity broken. Those cracks did not heal. Instead, they lingered, shaping the politics of the kingdom for generations to come. And it was at this vulnerable moment that outsiders arrived. In 1894, as Rwanda's royal court reeled from internal conflict, German explorer Gustav Adolf von Gotzen entered the kingdom. His meeting with the young King Muzinga marked the beginning of Rwanda's colonial chapter. Just 3 years later, Rwanda was absorbed into German East Africa. The Germans chose not to dismantle the kingdom but to rule through it, reinforcing the authority of the Mwami and Tutsi chiefs. In 1907, Richard Kant was appointed as the first German resident, shaping the foundations of colonial administration. Soon after came Catholic missionaries, who spread Christianity but gave more attention to educating the more visible elites. Though the German rule was short-lived, it was transformative. It entrenched existing hierarchies, aligned colonial power with the Tutsi aristocracy, and infused European racial ideology into Rwandan politics. Yet it all came to an abrupt end during the First World War. In 1916, Belgian forces invaded from neighboring Congo, driving out the Germans and taking control of Rwanda. A new colonial chapter was about to begin. After World War I, the League of Nations formalized this shift, granting Belgium a mandate over Rwanda-Urundi. Like the Germans, the Belgians pushed the system even further. They governed almost entirely through Tutsi chiefs, sidelining Hutu leaders. Forced labor and heavy taxation fell hardest on Hutu farmers, and Tutsis were appointed to drive these unfair laws, deepening resentment. Then came the most devastating change of all. In 1933, Belgium introduced identity cards that classified every Rwandan as Hutu, Tutsi, or Tua. What had once been fluid became fixed, and those lines would scar the nation for decades to come. As a result, by the late 1930s, Tutsis, though only 14% of the population, controlled 43 of the kingdom's 45 chiefdoms. Belgian officials such as Charles Voisin reinforced the system, declaring Tutsis born to rule and Hutus born to serve. What had once been a hierarchy shaped by cattle and wealth was recast as race. Then came the fall of the monarchy and rise of the republic, 1950 to 1962. By the 1950s, Rwanda's monarchy stood on shaky ground. Mwami Mutara III Rudahigwa, who had ruled since 1931, was seen as both a modernizer and a devout Catholic king. But in 1959, he died suddenly during a Belgian medical visit in Bujumbura. His death shocked Rwanda, and suspicion lingered of Belgian involvement. His half-brother, Kigela Ndahindwa, ascended the throne, ultimately becoming the last Mwami of Rwanda. But the monarchy was under siege. Tutsi elites formed the Union National Rwandais, demanding independence while preserving the crown. On the other hand, Hutu intellectuals, backed by Belgium, rallied around Gregoire Kayibanda and his Pama-Hutu party, calling for majority rule. In November 1959, a violent clash ignited a nationwide revolution. 20,000 Tutsis were massacred. More than 150,000 fled into exile. Then in 1961, a Belgian-backed referendum abolished the monarchy. King Kigeli Ndahindurwa moved into exile. On July 1, 1962, Rwanda became an independent republic under Kayibanda. The 1,000-year-old monarchy had fallen, replaced by a fragile republic built on ethnic division and exile. President Gregoire Kayibanda instituted ethnic quotas, barring Tutsis from education and public service. In 1963, Tutsi exiles launched an invasion from Burundi. The reprisals killed another 20,000. More massacres followed in 1967 and 1973. By the early 1970s, over 300,000 Tutsis lived in exile, scattered across Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, and Congo. Their children grew up stateless, determined one day to return. Then, in 1973, Major General Juvenal Habyarimana seized power in a coup. He created a one-party state, the MRND. Rwanda appeared stable, even receiving international aid. But beneath the surface, exclusion persisted. When Tutsi exiles demanded return, Rwanda resisted. With one of the highest population densities in Africa, leaders claimed, "There is no space." By the late 1980s, Rwanda's fragile economy was collapsing. Over 90% of the population depended on subsistence farming, yet the land was exhausted, forests stripped, and erosion rampant. Droughts brought hunger, and when world coffee prices crashed in 1989, Rwanda's main source of foreign earnings vanished. The result was crushing debt, malnutrition, and despair. Instead of reforming, the Habyarimana government turned inward, slashing public spending under IMF austerity measures and tightening repression. In this climate of poverty and hopelessness, the regime found an enemy to blame: the Tutsi minority. Hate propaganda filled the airwaves, while militias were quietly trained and armed. The economic crisis became tinder, and politics struck the match. Then came 1987, when exiled Tutsis formed the Rwandan Patriotic Front. Led first by Fred Rijima, then by Paul Kagame, the RPF sought return through force. On October 1, 1990, the RPF invaded from Uganda. Rijima was killed within days. Kagame rushed back from US military training in Kansas to assume command. The war dragged into stalemate. Tens of thousands of civilians were arrested or killed. By 1993, peace talks in Arusha promised power sharing and refugee return. But Hutu extremists resisted. They stockpiled machetes, trained militias, and prepared for genocide. Then, on April 6, 1994, Habyarimana's plane was shot down, and within hours, roadblocks went up across Kigali. And the killings began. Tutsis were hunted down. Moderate Hutus were slaughtered. In just 100 days, between 800,000 and 1 million people were murdered. Churches and schools became slaughterhouses. Between 200,000 and 250,000 women were raped. The world looked away. UN peacekeepers were withdrawn after 10 Belgian soldiers were killed. The US and UN refused to call it genocide. France launched Operation Turquoise in June, creating a safe zone, but also enabling many perpetrators to escape. Only the Rwandan Patriotic Front RPF, advancing town by town, stopped the killings. On July 4th, the RPF finally captured the capital city of Kigali. By mid-July, the genocide was over. But the horror did not end there. Nearly 2 million Hutus, civilians, militias, and government soldiers fled into Zaire. Refugee camps became militarized, sheltering genocidaires who continued to kill. This exodus lit the spark for the Congo Wars, conflicts that would engulf Central Africa and claim millions more lives. Then, inside Rwanda, justice began. Local Gakaka courts tried nearly 2 million cases. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in Arusha prosecuted 93 high-level leaders, including Prime Minister Jean Kambanda, the first head of government ever convicted of genocide. In 2000, Paul Kagame became president. His government abolished ethnic labels, declaring all citizens simply Rwandans. Rwanda's economy has since grown rapidly. Kigali today is seen as one of Africa's cleanest and safest capitals. The country has emerged from devastation determined to build unity where division once reigned. Rwanda's tragedy was not inevitable. Colonialism hardened identities into rigid categories. Post-independence leaders entrenched exclusion. Refugee crises fueled militancy. And when the world looked away, extremists unleashed horror. 1/10 of the population perished in just 100 days. Yet from the ashes, Rwanda rebuilt. Its story is both a warning and a lesson. When identity is weaponized for power and the world fails to act, catastrophe follows. If this episode gave you a deeper understanding of the Rwanda genocide, please like, share, and subscribe. Our next episode focuses on the First Congo War. Join us